Welcome tonight on this lovely July day in Memphis. I know that all of you aren't in Memphis, but I think the temperature was about 110 when you factored in humidity and everything. So I'm glad that we are all inside, cooling down, and coming together for another incredible Beit Abulafia session with Jason Kaplan. This has been a wonderful partnership between the Memphis Jewish Community Center and our Center of Jewish Living and Learning and Jason Kaplan to really bring this unique form of music, of meditation, of really just a way of connecting with your soul. And so we are thrilled to have Jason along with all of the wonderful guests that he brings. And this is really a precursor to a Beit Abulafia series, which right now will begin August 18th. It will be every Tuesday evening at 7:30. And you'll really get to go deep into Beit Abulafia and these ideas with Jason. As of right now, we're planning for it to be in person at the JCC in Memphis, but it's amazing what technology can do at this point, and we may have ways for you to connect in, and we will be sure to keep you all posted with all of that information. So with that, I will turn it over to Jason, and thank you again for this partnership. We're so excited to be working with you.
Great. Thanks, Lauren. Lauren is just a great partner. The Memphis Jewish Community Center is just incredible. I just love the partnership. And I want to thank Shoshana Sanker for coming on to moderate and to help us move the conversation along in a very constructive way, which has always happened. And I want to thank Kenny Werner for coming. Met Kenny Werner in 2004. I've still got my book of the old synagogue that we did a production in of his music. And I just want to show you the picture, Kenny. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's the picture back in the day, 2004.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I remember that picture. Yeah. The electric piano, the Fender Rhodes.
I was going to tell that story at the end, but he brings it up. People talk about meditation and being centered, and I saw Kenny Werner put it to practice when the Fender Rhodes that I put a lot of money into, and I tried to get the top of the line for him. Well, it broke while he was playing, and the keys fell out on him like steps falling out of someone going upstairs. And so he got up and said, "I'm a little upset. I can't perform." And I said, "Well, I spent this money. I try to get the best for you." He goes, "Okay." And so I just, somebody who's in the moment, in the music, and just a master of music and emotions. I really appreciate that. So I'm here to make up for that 15 years later, Kenny. So
I'm sure you don't have to. It led to some new music anyway. So I'm sure.
To start off, I just want to again thank the Memphis Jewish community. I want to thank Shoshana. I want to thank Kenny Warren for coming and all the guests, friends and family for coming to this really unique session, which we record and we send out to folks. And I've gotten such great feedback from the Dave Liebman session. We're going to get great feedback from Kenny Warner session. Let me start with a bio, please, so we know who is on our call today. This is from the Berklee School of Music, the Effortless Mastery Institute, which is based on Kenny's landmark work or book from 1996. So let me read. Kenny Werner has been a world-class pianist and composer for more than 40 years. 1996, he published his landmark book, Effortless Mastery, Liberating the Master Musician Within. Werner has since created videos, lectured worldwide, and authored many articles on how musicians, artists, and even business people can allow their master creator within to lift their performance to its highest levels, showing us how to be spontaneous, fearless, joyful, and disciplined in our work and our life. His natural instinct for improvisation led Werner to Berklee in 1970. There, he sought tutelage of the renowned piano teacher, Madame, is it Shaloff? Shaloff, yeah, okay, who became a driving force in Werner's goal to create music conscious of its spiritual intent and essence. So we're on the 25th anniversary of Effortless Mastery, released 1996, and Jason Kaplan bought that book in 1996, my second year of college, and I've studied it ever since. So you can.
I bought it also.
Excellent. So with that, I thought I would turn it over to Shoshana to help us start the conversation. And thanks again for everyone for coming.
Hey everybody, I'm Shoshana. I'll sort of be your moderator as we go through. I'm sure everybody has a million questions, just like I do. So we're going to open it up a little bit later on, but I want to get a little bit of background. So for those of us who are newer and maybe haven't been with us in the previous sessions, Jason, if you could just give our new guest sort of a little bit of info about your journey into mindfulness and meditation, and maybe a little bit of a refresher about Abulafia. And then you and Kenny, I want y'all to share with us how you met, how you connected, and what that was all about too.
Okay, great. And I'm going to be brief on this because I really want the focus to be on our guest. But I think, Shoshana, it's very important just for me to say, Beit Abulafia wasn't based on how to lead me to contacting Kenny again and having a great conversation that we had on Sunday about this. And then the audience will be able to hear Kenny's approach to all of this. So if I'm able to share my screen, could I ask to be made host, Lauren? I'm sorry, I should have asked that at the beginning. And I'm going to show you diagrams for Abulafia and how it's led to me to believe this Kabbalist is very universal and very relevant for today. So I want to read one piece. This is a gentleman, a rabbi who's born in 1240, so almost 800 years ago. And he says the following in his Sefer HaHesek. And he says that the influx that he was receiving, some type of spiritual influx that he was receiving from his meditation technique, the person will receive it, and from which the person will comprehend the form of universal wisdom that's beyond time. And that's very unique for a Kabbalist, I think, to say, and someone from 800 years ago. And I think from my talk with Kenny, we were talking about how, the universal aspect of spirituality, it's just amazing that we're still trying to push it forward. And it seems so natural. So that's why I love Abulafia. And if I'm able to share, great. I'm going to just show you the diagram. That should be coming up. And so this is from one of Abulafia's students, Rabbi Yehuda Albertini, and these are 4 Hebrew letters where Abulafia and his students say, if you write these all out in their 24 different permutations, which are right here, with that disciplined practice and writing it out in a very systematic way, then it releases effortless expression. And there's a feeling of nevuah or prophecy or exchange of information, and the person starts writing out all kinds of ideas. And I always thought that was really nice, but I didn't really know what they were talking about. So one day I left out a manual from Jerry Bergonzi, the saxophone player, and he said you should take 4 notes and permutate it 24 different ways. And then at some point, the melodies will just come out. And I thought, wait a minute, didn't I just read that somewhere? I was like, wow, is this book from the 13th century a kind of a Hebrew jazz manual? And from my studies, I think it is. So to be succinct, from there, I thought, well, I'm going to call up some of my jazz heroes that said yes to me back in 2004 to perform and show them what I've been working on and see if they'd like to comment on it. So that's where we're at. Today's talk is for Kenny to really go into his worldview, and he's not going to really be commenting on Abulafia per se, but we had a wonderful conversation on Sunday, and that brings us up to this class today.
And then quickly tell us, Jason, how you guys met. I know you briefly touched on it. Just give us a little bit more.
Oh, I've been a fan of Lieben, Kenny Werner, Andy Statman, John Zorn, and I was calling them and trying to work with their managers, and they're like, should we play at a place in Washington Heights at the top of Manhattan with this kid? Yeah, I don't know. So I got Andy Statman to say yes, and then I would call the rest of the guys and be like, well, Andy's coming, and they're like, oh, well, maybe, and that's how I just kind of cornered my way in to meet my heroes and get them to perform up there, and they were just so gracious, each and every one of them, and to keep in touch with me all these times. They're just wonderful people. So that's how we met, and Kenny did a trio gig up there. It was very well received, and we stayed in touch. These are just great people.
Great, thank you. Kenny, I want to start way back at the beginning, if you don't mind. When I was trying to do some research about all the amazing things you've done in your life, it's amazing, and I'm fascinated. I want to start with the Effortless Mastery Institute and how it started and where the idea came from and what it looks like today.
Yeah, well, the Effortless Mastery Institute is more like the end of a process than the beginning of a process. Actually, the beginning of the process is when I started to teach without thinking or having any agenda, which is kind of what we're talking about. I would notice things about the people that, if they took a lesson with me, things that nobody talked about, like, oh, right there, you tried, didn't you? He said, yeah, how did you know that I tried? I could just feel it. And also there was a dip in the performance. And so I was teaching something that I wasn't really thinking about, but teaching for me in the case of music is observing what the person's doing to see what can they do. And in music, there's too much emphasis on being able to do something right, not enough emphasis on being able to do it easily. See, because you could do something, but you can't do it easily, in which case your performance either is stiff or you can't perform it, but you know it. So the ease is the whole thing, and it's almost never talked about. So as this went on, I gave a lecture at the International Jazz Educators. They did workshops and then classes. And I started to speak about this, and it instantly caught fire. And the guy that published my book, Jamie Abersol, who is a pioneer in jazz, jazz publications and how-to books and play-alongs, and he videoed it and he started sending it out to people because it was so different. He's actually, in his own way, kind of a mystical guy. I wasn't trying to do anything except my honest observations about the illusion of importance of what we were doing. The illusion of importance, unfortunately, limits creativity. It doesn't enhance it. So anyway, then I started getting invitations to speak, and that turned into workshops and 4-day master class. I mean, I was just led by the phone ringing. And at the end of that process, I felt like I had so much worked out. Yes, it was the same stuff, but it all came from real time, from just receiving. And then the most potent parts of my speaking would keep, because it would instantly land and became almost like a script. And that's when I wrote a book. From the time I wrote the book, it was and remained very popular with musicians. It just keeps going around in circles, like one of those books that every generation feels like they need to read for some reason. And it's doing today what it did back then for young musicians, actually young artists, sometimes not even artists. People can read it and shoot different golf. I mean, none of this was my intention, but the book has its own life. After getting that reputation, at about 7 or 8 years ago, I decided I've never really, given much credit. I mean, people would thank me, they'd hire me, and it would help facilitate a tour, a couple of those schools, and that would help facilitate a tour. I'm still thinking of myself as a player who had this other way of being hired and was of interest. And finally, at a certain point, I kind of said, why don't I just own this thing a little bit? And I called Berkeley and said, I'm thinking of traveling less and really teaching this thing that seems to have been so popular by itself. And the head of the school is Roger Brown. He's the president. And he wrote me right back and said, man, we'd be honored to have you. I was in music school and I was going to quit. And I read your book. So, I mean, I get that kind of thing happens all the time. This book has its own spiritual journey that I don't even feel part of anymore. But when I came there, it took a year for them to find the right place for me. Where could I fit into a bureaucracy and do what I do? I didn't want to just give piano lessons. I wasn't interested in that. And after about a year, they had this opening as the artistic director of the Performance Wellness Institute. And this was something they were acknowledging. It was mostly about taking care of your ears. And, they had done a survey and realized that 70% of the students played with some kind of pain. So they were processing that, but it seemed to be something that could be connected to what I had already been teaching. So if that was 2015 or whatever, 2016, I had been into it for over, like almost 30 years intuitively. So we did that. And a year later, my boss, this guy, Matt Mavuglio, who was the chair or the dean of performance, we both kind of agreed, why don't we call it the Effortless Mastery Institute and move it away from something that sounds like the nurse's office into something that everybody's interested in. How do I play better? It's not about how am I be more healthy, because that wouldn't be that much of interest. Nobody went to Berkeley to get well. That's a fact. Nobody went to Berkeley to study Tai Chi. Nobody went, but why would you even mess with that stuff if it didn't make you play better? That's kind of the principle of effortless mastery. On the lightest level, you find yourself playing better. So it's easy to like. On the deepest level, it's mystical. So now it's been 6 or 7 years I've been doing that, and it's just been expanding. And I look for grants so that we can do more, put on activities and invite more guests and maybe even hire more teachers. But pretty much the Effortless Mastery Institute is Tai Chi, Qigong, Alexander technique, body mapping, and yoga for musicians. Most of those were part of the Performance Wellness Institute, but now it's all grouped under and then my courses, which are courses in the steps, which is a part of the book that is the solution to the problem that the book puts out in the first half. The steps are a reprogramming instrument. And since I've had an institute, for the first time, I didn't just teach it, like go to a school for 2 days and then leave, and they'd all get very uplifted, but then they wouldn't be able to maintain it. The old things would assert themselves. Now they were semesters on these things. And the challenge for me was to make a semester out of essentially this thing. And it just got stronger and stronger. I believe it's at its strongest point now that I've been doing it on Zoom for over a year. Somehow that even took it to another level of transformation. And I will be going back to Berkeley in the fall, because so far we're all coming back. However, I've now started to teach online classes of my own so that you don't have to go to Berkeley in order for me to instruct you in this basically transformational technique, so that a person experiences the fulfillment of music. And that's how we got to where we are today, pretty much.
It's amazing. So I want to find out a little bit later on. You keep saying this is how I teach it. So I'm curious to not that you're going to give away all the goods, but how do you teach something like that? But before we get there, when I was reading about you and what your program is, I noticed that focus is obviously one of the key principles that's included. But then you also talk about how there's the discipline to enjoy the freedom and of whatever expression they're giving, and then feel that spiritually and mystically, like you said before. So what do you draw your own enjoyment from without inhibition, without insecurities, when you're playing and when you're teaching?
Okay, well, first of all, you have to redefine focus. Focus was always something we thought that we had to do. It was like our will to focus. Now, I think that does work for people, but it never worked for me. For me, it was the reverse. The more things you remove from the space. First of all, in the book, there's a very general idea. You're either in your conscious mind, which is the things that keep us constricted. And of course, this is not original. This goes back to India. This goes back, early Judaism. But I mean, India was the first. It was presumed that we had really two different levels of perception: the physical existence and this whole other reality of who we really were. So what happens, where's all those? Focus is the absence of thoughts. It's not the will to focus throughout this sort of, what do you call it when you sink into the ground, a quicksand of thoughts, and you're going to fight it and you're going to focus. It's not that. You exit the room of thoughts, and in the space, the other aspect in Effortless Mastery, which every religion and philosophical and spiritual path has names for this. For me, I simply call it the space. When you're in the space, you're not in your head. So you operate on such another level of simplicity and efficiency. From the conscious mind, you hope you play well. From the space, you just play. From the conscious mind, you have too much to practice, so it's overwhelming. From the space, you never even think of practicing on anything more than one thing at a time, the thing that's in your field of vision while in the space. And many things, the ego operates in the world of thoughts. The ego is not part of this space. So therefore, you don't just incrementally improve on your character defects, so to speak. You just leave them, but you may leave them for short periods of time. But in that time, you are a higher representation of yourself, or you can say it so many ways. You're in alignment with the spirit. You're in alignment with God. Whatever you believe, you're it at that moment. Super conscious. So, and now there's neurological explanations. It doesn't really matter where the source is. The question is, do you receive it, or are a bunch of consequences and expectations in the way that paradoxically block what you really, ironically, block what you really want, So I teach how to literally untangle yourself from that and touch the instrument from a space where you're not really part of it. And you have to learn that very gently at first. And it has to go on for a while, because you're trying to reprogram something that's been so programmed that, the problem with caring about how good you sound is that it doesn't just define how good you sound. We value ourselves as humans. That's how dramatic, by whether we played well or we played badly. We tend to think of ourselves as less. So this this propensity for needing to sound good, there's one problem with it. It's in the way of sounding good. So with that in mind, my teaching is literally pulling a person out of that. And I use the breath, but I use it in a very, very portable and simple way so that you really couldn't miss it. Instead of like, let's do these breathing exercises, I say, we don't need breathing exercises. You're all experts. You've been breathing all your life. You're virtuosos at breathing. But what if we just watched ourselves breathe for like 20 seconds instead of trying to extend it? And I help them get introduced to even a spark of this space, which is only the absence of, and is the absence of everything we don't want anyway. And the more they visit that, then it's about going into that space, touching an instrument, and not being sucked right back into your world of expectations. So that's how I teach. The first two steps is learning to touch the instrument from the space, and then learning to move around. And it's not piano, it's any instrument. Learning to move around that instrument. And here's how you program the mind, which is pretty revolutionary. If you start thinking or caring, you drop your hands. So you literally stop playing. You train your mind the way you train a dog. You tell it to sit, and if it gets up, you stop. And you go back to the space. Then you bring your hands up again, or your armature, or singing. And as long as it's coming through you, we all talk about that, but very few people do it. Because the difference between a great philosophy and the implementation is an exercise. If there's not a practice of some kind, then a philosophy remains an inert philosophy. It never becomes something that a person actually does. So effortless mastery, and I'll ask people, have you ever had that experience where it was just happening? And mostly everybody has. But the cruelty of it is they can never choose when to have it. And of course, it would never happen when they want to show it to somebody else, right? So therefore, effortless mastery is the practice of having that experience more reliably until it becomes who you are. And you have reprogrammed from being the musician to being the instrument.
It's amazing. It makes so much sense when you say it, then putting it into practice and actually following through, I'm sure is, where all the hard work comes in. Jason, I feel like with your musical background, you can relate to this in a lot of ways, because the way that you play a lot of your blues is improv. And it must be that you just have to like let all the things go, and then the music just takes over and you're in that space that Kenny is referring to. Does that sound about right?
Yes, that's a great point, and a lot of the ability to do that comes from Kenny's book. So, I always thought I got to learn jazz, I got to learn the standards, and actually I just love playing blues. I just love playing it. Then I thought, oh, my blues has got to sound sophisticated, and then I would read Effortless Mastery. And I was like, you know what, I'm supposed to just enjoy this, and who cares if I play good or not? And I can't attach so much importance to it. Just go out there and have a cup of coffee in front of the audience. So that's what I do. I just schmooze with the audience about how I'm feeling blues wise. I don't care about scales or like, do I sound like BB King? Do I sound like Albert King? The book has really guided me just to have coffee with an audience and then go home, and it was great. And encourage people. And also when I teach kids and they're like, I'm trying to get this song, I'm like, don't try to get this song. Let's go back and let's just practice one note and let's just have fun. And it's a remarkable thing. You have people dedicate their lives to the discipline of their art, and then they come out and say, don't try. That's the secret of this whole thing. And it's hard for all of us to get a hold of that. We're supposed to practice basketball and do all these exercise and drills and focus and push ourselves. And maybe that works for sports. Maybe there's some sports psychology that can integrate effortless mastery. But I found it in music that I really loved music with this. And I want to make one point. I took Abulafia's system and I applied Kenny's system to what Abulafia is doing, and it helps me enjoy religion. The Judaism that and the community that I'm in is the Orthodox Jewish community. It's got a lot of rules. It's got a lot of expectations, and I love it. I love the structure of it. But there's a point in it where I just want it to be simple, enjoyable, and not all the heaviness of the expectation. And with Abulafia and just letting Hebrew letters flow through me and just writing certain ideas down and just this pops in my head, that pops in my head. It's very, very enjoyable. And when I read some of the rabbinic works, I can think to myself, I think they were doing that. And some rabbis are more explicit than others that they had heavenly messengers or angels that spoke to them, and maybe it was their subconscious. I'm not exactly sure, but they had a real joy in their writing. Particularly, Hope is on the call, and we share a real love of Rabbi Nachman. And you can see when Rabbi Nachman writes, he's just in a state of joy, and he's not thinking about the heaviness and seriousness of God and religion. He's just enjoying it. So I've seen a lot of parallels with what Kenny's taught, and he said, as he said, it's been through thousands of years, but it does take a unique person. I want to compliment Kenny, who in a unique way packaged it and delivers it and communicates it in a very unique way, even if it's a timeless wisdom. And again, I'm just so happy he came today to explain this, and I can show how I'm using it with Abulafia.
Well, I have to say that it came about the same way you're talking about. I never my goal to teach anybody anything, because I'm a player. I have the same, I wanted to play, I want everybody to hear me. I wanted to write music, then I wanted to get it played, and I want people to hear it. But this stuff has always just come through. You know, the fun, you can't even have the intention of having fun. That was what will block having fun. It's the removal of these demands that makes something already fun. Now, the reason you can do it on blues is because you don't have to think about blues. You could do it on giant steps, which is, you know, the opposite of blues. Very, very intricate changes. All you have to do is know giant steps as well as you know the blues. So even when, you know, I would say to people, getting better is optional. If you can be fulfilled from the music you do know, that is the most important thing. But it's that treacherous journey when people want to actually add technology to it, add information, add changes. And that's the fourth step, how to do that. The difference is you can study a strict religion, or something with a lot of rules. You can study sports. The difference is if you do it from the space, you're waiting for familiarity to descend on you. You're not reaching out for it, and then you may achieve it on a certain day, but it doesn't have a foundation. And just when someone's watching you do it, suddenly you can't do it. There's a principle I've just uncovered rather recently. I call the Familiarity Principle. Meaning, if you practice something without needing to learn it, familiarity will descend on you. It's unavoidable as long as you are normally functioning mentally, physically, and neurologically. If you keep if you go to a certain house and you keep looking at directions, every day you go, no matter what, you're going to become more familiar with how to get there. And it's the same thing. If you were to practice something, say like brushing your, with the non-goal oriented thing of, say, brushing your teeth. Nobody brushes their teeth and says, wow, I'm really getting somewhere now, boy, pretty soon I'm going to have, and then by a certain time, I'll be able to brush my teeth with the big, there's no agenda. No matter how well you brush them tonight, you fully expect to wake up and brush them again in the morning. And if someone takes new information and practices it with that lack of, consequences or expectations, familiarity will dawn on them because of the repetition. And that's the way you could study any text, anything. The way to do it is to do it without the urgency of learning it. Then familiarity is it's unavoidable. It's the repetition that creates familiarity, and that's unavoidable. So there's a way to never come out of your comfort space, meaning you're not reaching for something that's not there. So when you're playing, the only practice is learning to appreciate, even love, anything that is coming out, because nothing messes it up like trying to go for something else. Anybody that's a musician out there, just think about, you were playing and everything was fine, then you thought in some way it's got to be better. That's exactly when it went in the tank. So learning to be profoundly content with what is the best foundation from which to study new things with patience. You're patient because you don't need to learn it, because you're profoundly content with what it is you're playing. And ironically, that person adds language to what they're doing.
I can see the formula. All of this, though, begs the question, for me at least, if there's no agenda, then Kenny, when you play, what are you thinking about, or what are you not thinking about?
I'm watching. Now, there's no magic to it. If I can't play it, I can't just watch it. I have to try to play it. And in that case, my own personal career, I don't go out and play anything that I would have to try to play. I may practice it till it plays itself. This to me is not just a nice turn of phrase, it is reality. If it doesn't play itself, it's not worth playing in public yet. And also, I can't contact my own higher power, because if I go into my own connection, I'll lose the form, or I'll lose the beat, or I'll lose the, so mastering, and this is like, scriptures and things. You must master something in order to be free within it. you know? So when I'm playing, now if I'm learning something, I will learn it at such a pace where I still can sit in that center of my own being and wait for it to become more and more revealed. And I think there's a lot of parallels there too. So when I play, if I'm going to play, in short, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm hearing it. And I'm going, yeah, but I can't say do this because that would get in the way of my hands. So one of the things I like to say, the space is like this. I can't negotiate with my mind because my mind is more clever than I am. So I like to say my mind is smarter than I am, but my hands play better than I do. So the question is, who am I? And that is I think, at the foot of spiritual inquiry. Who am I?
So
Am I the
Jason,
person that needs to play music in order to feel good about myself? Or am I something that's unlimitedly golden as an entity that can't be in any way compromised by something as insignificant as playing a musical instrument? Which is another way of looking at it. And most musicians look at it the other way. I value myself by how good I play my musical instrument.
Excellent.
So then Jason, how would you say that relates to you and your form of self-expression?
I've gone on a spiritual journey when at the same time I got Effortless Mastery in 1996, I got involved with the Orthodox community and Kabbalah. So I've struggled for a long time and looked for a long time for a Kabbalah that was very personal expression based and very creative. A lot of Kabbalah talks about the different four worlds, different emanations of God's flow or spirituality into the world. And there's all these technical discussions which really do inspire people. They're great. I just kept looking for a rabbi in the Kabbalah that would say the information is going to come right into you, and then it's going to come out in a unique way. And that's what I found with Abulafia. So, when we talk about this class being connected to Abulafia and Kabbalah, he's a unique rabbi still. He was kind of put underground in, book-wise. People did not want to read it, talk about it, because it was so controversial that he said you could find divine flow directly from God, like a prophet. I mean, it scared the general Jewish population because that was reserved for Moses and Abraham and Joshua. So what I pick up from Kenny and from Abulafia is I call it little prophecy. I'm the prophecy that I feel like I'm not going to say this is going to happen to the Jewish people or here's what's going to happen in the future. I just feel like there's a lot of information that comes through me through the music. And as Rabbi Nachman says, you talk to God in your own language, and in a sense, he talks to us through the music. That's how I feel the Kabbalah and the jazz are in line or harmonize. And it's really, the past 2 years of discovering Abulafia has really enlightened my Jewish life because of that. There was a rabbi who was extremely universal, extremely individual, and he felt that all of us could receive the divine light in our unique way and still be committed to the Jewish people and the universal, broader implications.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Because I've had this it's funny, when I played with Andy Statman, I was playing with him for quite a while, and his manager is actually a scholar. He's written several books, David Sears.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think he's written books on Rabbi Nachman too. Yes. And he and I were having a discussion one night, and a lot of the most beautiful sentences ended with the phrase of the Jewish people or for the Jewish people. And I said to him, how is that universal if it's for the Jewish people? And here we are in the 21st century, and there was a tribal dominance on earth. The understanding of humanity was as tribal if you go back then, which is understandable. But when do we say of the people? When do Jews make, and I'm Jewish, so, but not that matters, but when do we cut that cord and take the wisdom and understand that the suffix is not of the Jewish people? When do we do that? So I'm talking to David, and we were having a really great discussion. he was saying stuff that Rabbi Nachman said, and I think I'm in something. I'm in a yoga group. I don't ever say the name, but I have a guru. And the thing about that whole thing, I'm not talking about my guru or that group. In general, it seems like that type of spirituality has never been hampered by the idea that that any person cannot be the receptacle and the channeler of this light, which I think is what even Western religions are trying to get to understand that, but they're afraid because there's still this identity thing that, well, what if we're not Jewish, what are we, well, we are the light, and I can't believe that if you're not Jewish, you're not the light. So just like in the Christian religion, of course, I find it sometimes downright offensive. If you're not following exactly that, there can be 4 different types of Christianity that are sure the other 3 are wrong. And I always say, how could that be? how could they say the same thing about what they're doing, So to me, we won't really reach this point until these divisions, even our most cherished ones, have been burnt up in the light. And then I think we'll all understand. So David and I are talking, we're going back, he's saying Rabbi Nachman, I'm saying things that Baba Muktananda had said, and he says something very beautiful of the Jewish people. And I had to say, David, that's where I got to think, that is a thinking that is many centuries ago when we moved as tribes. So, and I said, all right, so my particular thing, and I don't think it's just my thing, the thing about a yogic thing, particularly as it has its transplanted to America, is that it draws on any power. They might talk about St. Thomas, or they might talk about Rabbi Nachman. So I said to him, we have this magazine, and then here's the mystical element. We have this magazine that they put out every month, and I had about a stack of them like that big, I said, I'll just show you. In here will be quotes from any religion, because it's not a religion. That is this famous thing today. If you ask most people, they're not religious, but they're spiritual. Right. They don't follow a religion, but they have a spiritual path, right? So I pull this magazine out, and I didn't even open it yet, but on the back page is a quote by Rabbi Nachman out of about 30 magazines. And that is the kind of little subtle evidence we have. And jazz players experience it this way. I don't try to play with you, and we end up playing together. I try to play with you, and I'm always late. So there's these little hints that there is an overlording presence, but we can only become part of it. And to become part of it, there's things we have to remove. The candy coating of our ego is what makes us separate from each of us. And that is irrespective. So when I said to him, man, I pulled out one magazine, and it's a quote by Rabbi Nachman. It was quiet on her phone, and David goes, mind blowing, like that. Because David wasn't always a Hasidic. He was in the whole thing in Haight-Ashbury and the vegan thing. And then I didn't know that people became Hasidic. I thought you were born into that. And I've met several people. He introduced me. It was great. I would hang out with him. We did Passover with him. And you didn't eat till 3 o'clock in the morning. My daughter's face was in the soup bowl, but it was so great. And that's Brezhnev, which is a pretty mystical group of those people, and I learned a lot. And it really could all come together, but I just wonder about that part of it,
So I will jump in, because I know you started that as a form of a question, which confirmed your Judaism because it was a question, discussion, dialogue then.
Right.
But this is what I struggled with since 1996. I got involved with the Orthodox community, and I heard the same thing that you heard. It's the Jewish people, and the Kabbalah is very focused on the Jewish people. And so this is what I appreciate so much about what you've said, is the same thing that I struggled with. And I for my journey, I wanted to solve that within Judaism. And so that this revelation of Abulafia, of a gentleman who was committed to the Jewish people and committed to all people and would do both, and I can appreciate when you say, like, let's cut the cord and get to universalism. And I guess I would use the metaphor springboard. Let's have the Torah be the springboard, and let's keep the springboard to spring into universalism and keep our Jewish identity and let it blossom into the universal. But it has not been a path that's really been offered in the Kabbalistic world for a number of persecution reasons and horrible,
Right.
terrible persecution. The Jewish mystics said, look, let's just stick with our own. I can appreciate that too, but I think we're in the day and age where somebody from the 13th century said, and he would teach Christians, he taught Muslims, he studied with everybody, and there was always a
Right.
rationalist Jewish tradition that said accept truth from anybody, and they quoted all the great Arab philosophers. Maimonides quoted all the great Arab. So we do have that tradition, but it didn't filter into the mystical side yet. So that's why, coming full circle, I think this is just an incredible event to have you here and express those feelings and say that from my research over these years, I found a Rabbi Abulafia who said this. He's being studied more. There's a new event in Israel just last month, the first time that they're celebrating him over there. So I think something is afoot. And I think I can't quote you perfectly tonight, but to the fact that, we're on the brink of something beautiful that could emerge. And for me, I hope in the Indian faith, Baha'i, Sikh, whatever, we all find the space you're talking about together. And I think your work
Right.
is very,
There's
very
nothing
important.
ever against which vehicle you'll follow. The only thing is that you have to be sure is that that vehicle feels like a loose garment on you. And yeah, gives me the room. It doesn't argue against any one tradition. It encourages using, because all those traditions have a mystical source, but then politics and the limitations of humans turn them into organizations, into institutions, and then they have turf that you have to defend. And the mystical source, if you get, is identical. I think that's what David and I were doing over the phone. This stuff is identical before you get into the divisions that were drawn maybe for good reasons at the time. But we are at a time, I think we are at a special time, and those divisions, people will just realize it themselves, I hope. Because those divisions also are what cause a lot of the divisions plus technology make this a dangerous world.
Yes.
Right.
And I'll just add that I think that when people can experience the unity through music and then of course dance and art and other things, but Kenny and I, we share the love of music. But I think when people directly experience and say, "Wow, I can't argue against that," I feel like this is a space that every human can share. I think that direct experience is why I get so passionate about teaching music and talking about
Yeah,
Abulafia and sharing your work. Then they can say, "I can't beat it. This seems very real to me." So I think that's what's so unique about, I think that could be the part of the blossoming is this approach.
I think music will be at the forefront for a couple of very good reasons. For one, it's its own territory. There is Jewish music and there's Christian music, but music transcends all that. It's not jazz. That was only the reason jazz seems to be an answer in and of itself is because it utilizes what this rabbi, a jazz musician, lives the way this I'm sorry, I didn't really grab his name from what you're saying.
Yeah,
But
Abulafia.
yeah, Abulafia, a jazz musician is only doing what Abulafia was doing. And that was the sound of it in the 1920s through the 21st century. But to understand, I mean, to say jazz is just like to say it doesn't go all the way. I mean, what is jazz? It's music. What is music? Sound. What is sound? Vibration. What is this world and universe made of? Vibration. What is the body made of? Vibration. Therefore, we could be said to be music. So because it doesn't have the specificity, but also the awkwardness of words,
Yeah.
we can get to places that we didn't realize we got there, but the music just took us there. And if we had to explain it through words, and then especially if we had to justify it through our disciplines, it really is very hard to get to.
Yes.
I like this. I get most of my inspiration from movies and television. I have a new book, by the way. It's coming out in October after all these years. And it's coming out October 19th. And it's called Becoming the Instrument. And it's a wider thing on what Effortless Mastery was about. And I'm really excited about it because I think it'll just show that relationship to everything that ever was. So just know that we can have it this very second, any moment we want to, But I forget exactly why I just told you that. It had something to do with anyway, I just spaced out.
Jason, will there be a question and answer period? Because I
Yeah,
would
coming up
love
on
to.
that. We're
Okay,
coming up
because
on that. Yeah, sure.
I've got a million questions that I'll turn into one for Kenny.
Okay.
Wow. I'd like to see that.
We'll hold it for 30
Okay,
seconds.
you got it. You got it, Pops.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, coming up on there, Charlie. Thank you. So yeah, continue on, Shoshana.
No, I was just going to say that I probably speak for the group when I say that I would love to hear you, Kenny, play a little bit more, but we did want to open it up to some questions. And I think I saw Vilma with her hand up first, Charlie, if you don't mind. If I'm wrong, Vilma, and you don't have a question?
Maybe I can play at the end.
Not a
Yeah,
problem.
for sure.
Yeah.
Not a problem,
Yes,
Shoshana.
please.
Hey, Vilma, would you like to ask your question?
Yes. So I've been studying the Zohar, and I'm not like even delving too much into the first book yet. But a lot of what you're saying and a lot of things that come from this mystical tradition that is sourced from the Zohar, and all the things that you're saying about, the letters resonate with me, because according to what I've understood, all souls, were present at Mount Sinai, and the Jews were capable of receiving the totality of the light force that was encased in the scroll. So they had to prepare for, their voyage and to receive. So when, the musician talks about, eliminating all the things and expectations, I think about the desert journey. It brings me back to that point where, there was a universality to that, because that event changed everything. So I've heard, and I know that there are people who believe that everyone is capable of getting a revelation, but it takes effort, like the process that you guys are talking about is a very real process.
That's a very good point. I'll just comment that it's my bar mitzvah parsha when I was 13 is Bahalotecha, and that's my favorite part of the whole Torah, which Joshua runs to Moses and says, "Are these people prophesizing? We need to arrest them because you're the prophet." And Moses says, "That's why I'm here. Everyone should be a prophet." It's in the Torah, So it's my favorite line because I think it goes to the heart of that everyone. He said, "Oh, that I wish that all the people." He didn't say Jews. He said, "I wish that all the people were prophets." So I think that's a very powerful line, Vilma, and I think that's exactly what you're saying. It takes a lot of discipline, takes a lot of work, and then it takes a lot of work to unthink about the work. So very, very good point. I don't know, Ken, if you have any comments on that.
Well, again, the word effort, effortless, effort. It takes a lot of effort to do things effortlessly. You have to master the form. There's no question about that. But this light is available. I mean, there is, I guess you could call it effort, but it is just a determination to continue to realize the truth and focus your attention there. I guess you could call that an effort. And the truth is, there's nothing you have to do. But I guess you have to keep reminding yourself of that, because you're trying to attain something that you already have. See, it's much better. I come down on that side. If we did it in the most general thing, there's two kinds of things. I have to be worthy of something, okay? That to me is associated with certain kinds of religions. I have to be worthy of something. And then, or then there's ones that talk about sin. And, I'm sinful, and their religions say I'm born in sin, which is hard for me to understand. I guess there's a meaning there, but I don't think we know what that is. And it's certainly been perverted by a lot willfully, And so, but if I am sorry enough, I can be forgiven, right? Then there's this other side that are religions, but they say, you are God. You are perfect. Your only sin is you don't know it. So where do you put the effort? Into removing the illusions that you're not God. God a teacher I follow says God dwells in you as you. That part of it we have to really remember. It doesn't just mean, nobody would disagree from any religious tradition that if God is an ocean, there's a drop of that in me, right? But you have to remember it is as me. In other words, I have to imagine a perfection that already exists. And the effort is to keep going back to that.
Yeah. Excellent.
All right, Charlie, you're up.
Yeah, I bought your book years ago and I read most of it. I'm going to start it again tonight. I read it when it came out, actually, and I'm that old. It's like I'm a musician. All these great players that came before us, Louis Armstrong, Coltrane, Clifford, Bill Evans. I mean, we've got to learn to, like a baby learns to talk by listening to other people talk. So we have to learn to listen to other players. We have to listen to all the players we can and take what we like, which is almost everything. I've only had the experience once in a while of playing like a really good chorus. When I'm not thinking about the changes to that chorus, I'm not thinking about the melody. I'm not thinking that Billy over there is going to judge me to where he's going to use me in the next gig. I'm just blowing and it's coming out right. But that doesn't, and how do you play like yourself? I don't want to sound like Clifford. Oh God, would I love to, but I can't. And I'm not him.
Right. Okay, let me try to jump in because
yeah, please.
So let me just try to grab a few of your points. First of all, the reason you're not progressing is because it's not just about listening. It's about imbibing language. And that is a dry and very controlled subject that a lot of creative types don't have the patience for. But there's a way to do it. But you have to do it from a place of contentment and add language, You have to move at the pace that you can see the language connecting. You have to study language is language. You have to study, to me, 2-5-1, if you're talking about jazz, right? That's the dominant chord progression of jazz. It is like the pronoun, the verb, and the noun. He went shopping, 2-5-1. If you can't make a turn on the 5, that is simply, no matter how spiritually progressed you are, that is simply why you can't play on tunes.
Yeah.
And very simple. So if that work isn't done from a very, when I say a conscious place, you're conscious of not knowing it, and that's okay. So you're allowing it to become more familiar instead of damning yourself because the first time you study it, you're not doing it. And then people give up on that. That's why Jason's comfortable with the blues. You could play that for the rest of your life. But if you want to play another tune, there is work on language. And without that work on language, all you feel is more of a gap between what you hear it, but it's not in your hands or it's not in your embouchure or whatever instrument you play. And if it's not put in there in a very, and it's never too late to start, but we have to drop. I have a sort of a beautiful 2-sentence thing here. Your job is not to assess your progress. The reason we're never in our own space is because we're always asking ourselves how we're doing. Your job is not to assess your progress. Your job is to access your process. So if your process is, for example, really allowing the scales that go to these chords that I'm going to be creative on, how would I possibly be creative on a chord when it takes me 3 seconds to think what the scale is, or I don't know it? God is great, but there's no magic here. What you haven't imbibed doesn't come out.
Do you recommend transcribing?
Charlie,
transcribing is good, but it's better to take 2 bars of that transcription and do all kinds of things with it so that you own it than it is to learn the whole transcription, which is about as useful as learning a classical piece. None of that transcription shows up in your playing because it's too long. You see, what you're asking, you should take my course, which I'll probably do again in January, because everything you're asking is why you could practice and it doesn't change. Why doesn't it change? So one of the things, transcription, it's good for your ears to transcribe, but I wouldn't waste my time learning the whole transcription. I'd find a couple of juicy bars, find out why they are juicy, change the key, see if I own them yet, and stay with them until they're familiar. And then I notice I might be playing a tune and it just comes out. And then you talk about sounding like yourself. That desire is like a dog chasing his own tail. Okay? You sound like what happened. What instrument do you play?
I'm a trumpet player.
You sound like what happens when you play a trumpet. That's your sound. The only thing that can ruin that is wishing it was other than what it is. Okay? So,
Like I said, the magic happens every once in a while.
right, but there's no accident when it happens. All right, look, there's two reasons the magic doesn't happen. One is the psychological, which can dog people for their entire life.
Yeah.
Right? The other one is very understandable. You're not up to the technology of it. So if I suddenly throw giant steps in front of Jason, he may be holier than thou, but he's not going to play it because he doesn't have the technology. That's understandable. If he willingly and without losing self-love played it terribly, that would be spiritually very involved.
Yeah.
See, because the final test of your value is not how good you play an instrument, and it's an extremely small aperture from which to look at life. Okay, so one reason is how you're denying yourself by expecting something else than what's ready to happen. If you fix that, you start to get enriched by what's being played, which is a major change. Then, based on that firm territory, you can start to say, I can't play these 2 bars of this tune. Let me try different ways of doing it. I can't play, I always use the example of All Things You Are. You're a trumpet player, right?
Yeah.
What's the hardest part for you to play on the changes?
Well, you got to get to the end of the second phrase where it goes into concert C. I mean, everybody, if you miss that, you're schlemiel.
No. The hardest part for you to play, I bet, if you pulled your trumpet out, would be the second half of the bridge. 2-5-1 in F sharp. Okay? That's not the friendliest. That's not the friendliest key for a trumpet player.
But if you
B, we never play it. So when it comes up, so this is the way people play on All Things You Are, the bridge. You dig me, right? You dig what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no if you had magic, it certainly wouldn't happen on that part of the tune. When the magic now the other reason, so whenever the magic has happened, technologically the music was within your grasp easily. But the reason it only happens sporadically is the psychological element.
Excellent.
Wow.
Let me jump in there.
Take your course. That's all I got to say. I've got to take your course.
Great.
Well, anybody here that, Jason, you should make my email available, which I will pass on to my assistant. So you'll just be in sometimes I just do forums, and the forums people find very liberating. So
yeah,
you'll know when I'm doing anything. So
okay,
we'll definitely have to arrange that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna have a follow-up email, and anyone can get in contact with me, and I'll pass along Kenny's information for this. I want to thank everyone for coming. We're at the hour, and I hope Kenny could stick around just to play a little bit. I want to show you his original book, Effortless Mastery, Liberating the Master Musician Within. Yep, and book and CD, so it has a meditation you can listen to. You can read really good pieces here. There's a really interesting talk about Vladimir Horowitz, and I think it's a great YouTube to look at Vladimir Horowitz in Russia, when you can just see him looking at his fingers, just observing them, like Kenny's talking about.
Watching them play.
And of course you can watch Kenny. He has now kind of like a viral video of him kind of just almost like sleeping in his chair and playing, and people love watching that because you can see just how effortless you can get to. So I want to thank Lauren Taub. I want to thank Shoshana Sanker. I want to thank Kenny Werner. Just an amazing thing. And I think you can hear here that there's, at least for me in Judaism, there's a unique path forward. I think it can be done for other, and maybe it's being done in other religions. I don't know. But for me in the Kabbalistic Jewish world, there could be a very universal musical experiential piece where people can be in their Shabbat, keeping kosher and all the beautiful Jewish traditions, and be universal. And I think Kenny properly, accurately highlighted some of the blocks there to universalism, which I think comes from centuries of persecution, but we're at a place where we can rethink that, and we can use real experience, the experience of music and the divinity of music to rethink that, of dedication to the Jewish people and dedication to all of humanity. So with that, I think I thanked everybody. I thank everyone for coming, family, friends. Ken, if you have a couple extra minutes, if you'd play for us.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'll play the tune that I think is very meaningful. There's two things. Since the pandemic, it was always great to play You Must Believe in Spring, right? But I think in general, one of my favorite songs in the world is this.
Yeah.
Yes. Round of a virtual applause. Round of virtual applause.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
Kenny.
Thank you. It's beautiful to spend time with you guys, and I hope to hear from you. And just even, I do things, and when I do things, you'll know it. You'll be on my mailing list.
Yes, we're going to connect everyone there. A special thank you, Kenny Werner, from 2004 to 2021, working together again.
Jason, you look in great shape. You're doing something right. Maybe
it's all the-
keeping kosher, whatever it is, but you look better than ever. That all these years later. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
I want to thank everybody for putting up with me. Thank you very much.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
very good.
Believe me, it was quite a Herculean effort.
Okay.
And I just want to say,
yeah, go ahead, Laura.
thank you to Jason. It is always a pleasure to partner with you. We will share more information about the ongoing Beit Abulafia sessions and programs. There's lots of wonderful things coming up soon for the Jewish Community Center and everything that we're doing in the Center for Jewish Living and Learning. And we hope to see you all again soon, virtually or in person.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Shoshana, so much. Thank you, Lauren, so much. Thank you, Kenny. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We even
Thank
have
you,
some
Jason.
faculty from the University of Memphis, Mike Assad from the faculty there, and my folks, my brother, Hope, and Vilma. I'm trying to see everybody here, Sussy and Gyla, and Michael Tannenbaum. Thank you so much.
Jason, thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. Absolutely. And
it's a pleasure on this end.
Thank you. Thank you, Kenny. I hope we continue to work together. Everyone, just take my email, jason@ulr1.com, to get connected to Lauren at the JCC, to get connected to Kenny Werner. If you need, just look up the MJCC to find Lauren there. There's plenty of ways to get connected. And we wish you all a wonderful evening. Oh, and Stephen Wachtel, great to see you. And Joel Siegel came on, so I think I got everybody. Maureen, her son. So everyone have a wonderful evening. Be blessed, and let's push music and universal light and the space, and check out Kenny's work. And we're so excited about the new book coming out in October.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
It was great. Thank you.